Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, CEO of Boardroom Resources, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. We're here today at the Equilar's Compensation Committee Forum, and we took a break to come down here and to film a segment on why today's compensation committees need thick skin. And joining me as my guest, we were both up at the conference, is Phoebe Wood, who is the independent board member with Leggett-Platt, also serves on the board of Invesco Limited and Pioneer Natural Resource Company, and serves on the compensation committee of several of them. So Phoebe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, TK. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, thick skin, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And first of all, in today's world of added disclosures and everybody wanting transparency, what do you think is the biggest challenge for chairs and compensation committees, knowing how transparent the world is becoming?
Right. So the chairman has a role that's a little bit different from just a member of the committee, in that I think you have an ability to craft some of the agenda and to think carefully and thoughtfully about what it is that you want to do. And so let's talk about disclosure first. So with regard to disclosure, you must meet all the rules that are out there. We know the rules have been added to over time. We anticipate that they're going to be added to. Let's meet the rules. But in so doing, let's also leave enough time and take enough time to tell the story of what it is that we are trying to do and how we are trying to have the compensation of the executive and executives marry up with the strategy that is there. Yeah. Preparing for these remarks, I talked to a chairman of one of the companies, and he said sometimes it's harder to get alignment on the strategy than it is to get alignment around compensation to drive the strategy. And I thought that was an insight that is true. We work very hard as comp committees to make sure that what the strategy is going to be consonant and will drive performance against that strategy.
Yeah. One of the interesting things and first of all, there's so many challenges. This morning we did a Facebook Live segment that we talked about the challenge for boards. You know, they represent the shareholders. At the same time, they want to develop the best company with the best shareholder value that they can. Right. Shareholders have different interests, so it's not like it's common. So it does create a big challenge for compensation committees, and particularly when the press is particularly interested, the media, in compensation. You don't ever hear those comments about capital allocation, but everybody's a compensation expert. So we actually as an industry got a boost because both BlackRock and Vanguard came out and talked about how they want comp committees to not think short term, that they're in it for the long haul. They don't want them to worry about making short-term decisions that might hurt the long term. So do you think having the support, and those are the two, probably one and two of the largest institutional investors, in the world, do you think that they, that knowing that that's their attitudes, does that make it a little bit easier for comp committees?
Well, what they represent is institutional investors who are now engaging in direct dialogue with companies, and that's quite different from how it has been in the past. And so we went through an era of maybe sort of robo proxy advisors, and early on it was a little bit too much black boxy. But what has happened as a result of that is that companies have started to engage in direct communications with institutional shareholders and their other shareholders, and I think that is very healthy. And it forces a conversation that leads toward, here's what we're trying to do strategically, here's how our compensation is aligned to that, and here's how we're doing against that. And I think of that conversation as being very healthy and something that I would continue to encourage.
When you look at board compensation, okay, you have a different situation because now you have an inherent conflict, okay? What do you think is the best way for a board to handle its, dealing with its own compensation? What do some of your companies do, or what would you say is sort of a best practice?
All right. So I think that it's important to have a philosophy about how you're going to compensate the board, just as you have a philosophy about how you're going to compensate your executives. And that could be, we were planning to pay at the commensurate with our peer group. So get your philosophy and then really work hard to make sure that you are compensating in line with your peers. Just as people use peer groups for executive compensation, I think peer groups should be used for board compensation as well. And then I also think that we have to be rigorous about it so that we don't just use it as an afterthought, that we are as thoughtful about it as we are about executive compensation, just to make sure that we are within good guidelines, good disclosure, and using the kind of metrics that we should, and watching our peers.
And do you find that executives themselves are much more sensitive to the challenges that boards have because it's so public? Do you find them understanding how difficult it is for you to balance both their wishes and the shareholders' wishes?
They're especially good at it if they also sit on a board, because then they sort of have that other side of the table experience. And then they sort of understand the demands and the roles and the fact that it's an election by the shareholders we're elected to have the thick skin and to have the conversations and to hold management accountable as appropriate.
Well, we've had some great sessions upstairs around this whole topic. I was happy to moderate one of those, but tell me just one thing that you think was useful is that you're going to be taking back from that event upstairs.
So there was an excellent discussion about future discussion about the relationship between the CEO pay and the median pay. And that was because it is new and because we all know it's coming, there were some excellent ideas and some excellent insights that were provided about that. One of them I'll share, and that is that when you look at the median, it's a function of the geography, because if you're going to have median pay, it's a function of the geography in which you operate, because Kansas is not New York, is not Salt Lake City, so to speak, and is then a function of what industry you're in, because someone who is in the retail business is just not going to have the same compensation that someone in financial services. And so your median pay will reflect your geography and what business you're in and what industry you're in. And so getting that right and understanding that is going to require some analytics. We won't just be able to say, here it is and let's draw some conclusions, because we're at risk of drawing erroneous conclusions if we don't do the analysis.
Oh, don't get me started on that pay ratio, because I don't understand it. I'll have to wait to see how it's used. Most importantly, I'll have to wait till see how it's used by investors. But I know how the newspapers and the media is going to use it. They're going to do comparisons, and I just don't think it's any apples to apples. And I'm sorry that we have to do this as an industry, but that's the way it is. But Phoebe, thank you very much for taking the time to come down from the forum to join us.
Great.
That will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take a look at another critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.